Hi there, Mark Jamin here, Medical Director for the Haywood County Health Department. Let's talk about this pandemic. Time again for the weekly update, and again, it's a two-weekly update. So the summary is, well, my buddy says it all. Right side up finally, as cases and hospitalizations are down more. Test positivity is down. Favorable trends mostly, but not so for deaths. Almost as many deaths now this surge as the last one, and among much younger people. And my buddy wonders how long he'll be able to stay this way. So please share this with someone you care about. In the country, the hot spots are out west. The South, hard hit early on, clearly on the tail end of their surge. For instance, Florida, with now the lowest rate in the United States at week's end, and no counties there even close to the red. 24 states now in red, none above the 100 per 100,000 population threshold, even Alaska, though still quite high at 82. There are 63 states that have fallen into the orange, 3 in the yellow, but none yet in the green. For our neighbors, and I show the comparison to a month ago to highlight the marked changes over this time, everyone down even further into the orange, and Georgia right on the threshold of yellow. And note Tennessee, only 5 counties now in the red. For North Carolina in the orange too now, a further decrease in the last 2 weeks. There are only 12 counties in the red. There are 78 in the orange and 10 in the yellow. Cases, hospitalizations, and deaths all lower and on the way down across the state. And in western North Carolina, looky here, no one in red. Most everyone down again, some with substantial changes, again, on top of several weeks of decreases. And even those who were up or flat represented only small absolute numbers of increase. Some counties continue dramatic decreases. For instance, Graham, all the way from red to yellow over these past 2 weeks, and Clay. And even though the rate did not fall so much in Buncombe County, they did see the absolute number fall by nearly half again, another substantial decrease over these 2 weeks. As far as testing, North Carolina below the 5% threshold, and 6 of our western North Carolinas are now below, of our western North Carolina counties are now below the 5% threshold. And that's the most in a long while, led by Graham, all the way down below 1% test positivity rate. Haywood County, however, down, but still above the 5% threshold. For the pandemic for Haywood County, now 7,533. That's an increase of 91 a week ago and 69 over the past week. And you can see we are now below the exponential spread line. At 16 per 100,000 population, that equates to about 10 new cases a day. Probably a little higher given our test positivity rate of 7%. And recall, the goal is less than 2 to 3 per day and less than 20 per week with a test positivity below 5%. So we are getting closer. Haywood Regional Medical Center at week's end with only 4 COVID-related admissions, but there are folks who remain on ventilators. Deaths, an additional 11 reported in the past 2 weeks to a total now of 150 for the pandemic. Very close now in this surge to the number of deaths back in the December through February surge. The difference, however, is that last winter's deaths peaked in December and came down from there. This time, even as deaths go down in the state, for us in Haywood County, deaths are continuing on an upward curve. And those losing their lives in this surge are far younger than last winter, many more in their 50s, 40s, and even a death in someone in their 20s. Note here the lines indicating the color thresholds. We and Missouri back down together, Haywood County having a higher peak, but a shorter course. The UK reached a peak in new cases in the past 2 weeks. They got as high as their peak earlier this summer. However, you can see an emerging trend with the next peak possibly going even higher as they are never returning to an acceptable baseline before going back up. And will this continue that way for them? And what does that mean for us? So, what will this winter look like? Well, stay tuned. In a few days, we're going to have a look at the trends that might give us some insight. Darker days are upon us as the time changes, but that doesn't mean necessarily we are in for dark days. So be well and be careful, especially right now. Oh yeah, and a shout out to the Atlanta Braves. World Series champs. Take that, Bryant Moorhead.